Dear students, in this session we are going to discuss on the topic global concerns and the increasing awareness about governance and how corporate governance was introduced in India. So Indian corporates, they have insulated themselves in the wholesome developments. So a closed economy, a sheltered market, limited need and access to the global trade and business. And there was always a lack of competitive spirit. These made to have a regulatory framework. So earlier it was more of an observance of rules and regulations rather than the realization of broader corporate objective. So here Indian corporates, if you see, we adopted a socialistic pattern and we were into this family promoting businesses. So according to the survey conducted years ago, family shareholdings in big business groups, it was in an average of near 3.3% when you compare with the aggregate paid up capital. So under the new economic policy, we have some business houses, they enhance their stakes and they still remain captive for the meager stake as well. So the reasons for the corporate misgovernance in India are all these things, whatever I mentioned. So they were responsible for the poor governance of companies in India for over 40 years, from 1950s to 1990s. So how to face the winds in change in the forms of market-driven reforms that shakes the feeble foundation. After the economic liberalization, so we have started to go with the governance principles and practices. The corporate governance movement in India has started in 1997 with a voluntary code that was framed by the Confederation of Indian Industry, CII. Then after that, in the next 3 years, almost 30 companies, largely listed, and they have been adopted the CII code. And then SEBI, India's capital market regulator, they got into this act and they have set up a committee. That committee was headed by Mr. Kumaramangalam Birla. So it is called as Birla's committee. They have mandated the international standards of corporate governance for the listed companies. So this is the way how corporate governance was introduced in our country. So in 1997, these were all happening. In 2001, 140 companies, they have come, and we have also adopted some of the best international governance practices. After some years, each and every listed company, they have joined the SEBI code. So this change has started to give an awareness and the implementation of governance principles and practices in India. And there were very few concerns centralized into the international business. In the last few decades, there were series of events that has placed the corporate governance issues at the center stage, both for the international business community and for the international financial institutions. So, as I have given you a broad definition in the first session itself, academic literature tells about the corporate governance is bridging the gap between the separation of ownership and control. So, the governance focuses on the internal structure, rules of the board of directors, the creation of independent audit committees, rules for the disclosure of information to the shareholders and creditors, and control of management. So when somewhere we have to be have uniformity in all the levels. Can it be shareholders or board or management or employees? And we have different models to be discussed. We have market model, control model, and we have country specific model, how we are adopting, what are the models adopted by the developed countries and what are the models adopted by the developing countries. So these models will be discussed in the forthcoming sessions as well. As you all know, corporate governance a hardly bandied term in yesteryears. Now it has captured a center stage of business world. So numerous corporate fiascos, scams that have created this emergence of corporate governance among various stakeholders of the corporate sector. Can be shareholders, employees, suppliers, debenture holders, customers, banks, government, researchers, academia, even credit rating agencies. So this has become pervasive in nature. CG has become an integral element of a corporate house, be it a public limited or a private or public limited firm, small or large. It is essential for the management of a company to ensure that the rights of the stakeholders are protected and they get their due. Today, stakeholders are aware of their rights, and so ignoring them may result into a corporate cataclysm that may even lead to a collapse of a company from a particular industry. So, when you go by the definition of corporate governance, which is a set of process, policies, laws, rules and regulation, it covers a good relationship among the stakeholders involved in the company. The goals of the company will also be governed. Okay, that's what governance is all about. And this is a phenomenon of allocating corporate resources that has to maximize the value for all the stakeholders. If you take the providers of finance to companies, let it be individuals or financial institutions or even government, they ensure that their investments are safe and it will produce some desired outcome. So effective corporate governance is all about providing those assurances. In the first session, I have given you two different ways of definition, one in a broad perspective and then one in a narrow perspective. Right now, we are in this fourth industrial revolution, and from the view of corporate houses, Industry 4.0 or the fourth industrial revolution has given us more opportunities and advantages in terms of competitiveness, finance, overall equipment effectiveness, resource efficiency, human capital, time, individualization, data, the approach, business approaches. So that has given a very vast scope now. So I can here link Industry 4.0 and how the corporate governance practices are. So what are the opportunities and advantages? The first is competitiveness. The implementation of IR 4.0 that has increased the market dynamics, and it has offered lots and lots of opportunities to engage in technology. It revolutionizes the market position. Moreover, if you see Industry 4.0, it has proved to be a messiah by providing strategic differentiation. It has created a competitive edge in the market. So it has created a positive impact on business expansions as well as securing the market share. So this is the biggest opportunity and advantage of being in this governance practices of the fourth industrial revolution. In the financial aspect, this revolution has a very prominent role in providing steam to a value creation and sales. If you take, this does not only possess the potential of reducing the cost incurred for the production of goods and services, it also assists in the growth of the earnings of companies. So, time. IR 4.0 has set up lead times as well as faster machine speed facilities. So, somewhere more flexible in nature for the customer demands. Engineering and R&D, they are assisting us substantially and they are decreasing the time to market delivery. And as I already discussed, re-engineering, revamping, redesigning mechanisms are there. So obviously, if some of the processes or tasks that are not adding value to the process, they are easily removing it. So that non-valuable tasks or tasks which are not giving value addition to the entire process is not required. So, Industrial Revolution 4.0 touches the crucial elements of a particular industry that goes in sync with the corporate governance. In today's era, it's imperative for every business organization not only to meet the stakeholders' expectations, rather they have to go for sincere endeavors to be made to offer them more than they are entitled to. As without stakeholders, business cannot exist in vacuum. This is a very important factor. If an organization tends to operate within a given market, not only they have to aim for expansion and growth. In years to come, they have to concentrate on satisfying all these necessary things. If they are not concentrating, they may lose the competitiveness. If there is lack of data and integration in a company, there may be no transparency in the process. That leads to a chaotic situation. Conflicts will arise. So, for a robust corporate governance, this Industrial Revolution 4.0 has paved the way. Now, let's focus on this topic, system of corporate governance. There are different forms of systems of governance. The main two systems are insider dominated system. The second one is outsider dominated system. Insider dominated system of corporate governance. It's a system of governance in which their country's public listed corporations, they are owned and controlled by a small number of major shareholders. So the insider system is like the relationship based system. There is a close relationship that prevalence in between the companies and their dominant shareholders. And it is characterized by the highly concentrated holdings. They have the voting power. And this bank dominated relationship or pyramidal ownership, they have the familiar control, they have a high degree of cross holdings. So these are all the most dominant features of being in an insider system. You can see this insider corporate governance system more prevalent in countries like Germany and Japan. They prefer more with this insider dominated system. Now coming to outsider dominated system, it implies the systems of finance where big firms are controlled by the managers but they are owned by the outside shareholders. Can it be financial institutions or individual shareholders as well? So you have the outsider system characterized by the existence of the ready market and then you can go with the instant supply of managerial power. Let me put this very clear. I'll just differentiate this with this. When you talk about insider domination, firms owned predominantly by the insider shareholders. They control over the management. In outsider, large firms controlled by the managers, but they are predominantly owned by the outside shareholders. Here, the concentration of ownership in a small group of shareholders, that is dispersed ownership in outside. So, in the insider setup, wealth transfer is from majority shareholders will be taken from the minority shareholders. That is the transfer of wealth from minority to majority. Where here there is no transfer of wealth from minority shareholders to majority shareholders. And in this insider setups, you have weak investor protection. And in the outsider setup, you have strong investor protection. And insider, you have the potential for the abuse of power by the majority shareholders. Here, the potential for shareholder democracy is there. Majority of shareholders tend to have more voice in an insider setup, where in the outsider setup, you tend to go with the exit approach rather than giving your voice. So this is how I can differentiate between the two different insider and outsider set. Now focusing on the global organizations who are posturing the corporate governance mechanism. Let me start with OECD, the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development. Then ICGN, International Corporate Governance Network. The European Union is there. Commonwealth Association of Corporate Governance. Asian Corporate Governance Associations are there. Now we are going to see what are their activities in ensuring good governance practices. Let me start with OECD. Over time, you have seen it has become a very reputed, respected and leading organization. They do this comparative analysis in a globalized world, and it is now clearly, you can say, it is a go-to multilateral forum, and they include digital mechanisms here. They use databases for taxes, digital taxation, digital trading, data privacy, artificial intelligence is there. So, recent years it has played a noteworthy role in upgrading and updating the standards. They have adopted an inclusive as well as a multidisciplinary approach, and they have taken an effort to build a stronger and a fair world economy. If you see, OECD has strategically refocusing on the work, and they are culminating into the most important areas, let it be tax or export credits, education, labor, peace. So these are all the ways in which we are globally concerned through corporate governance. Forum like ICGN, the International Corporate Governance Network, has come out with several policies, and they have an integral priority as well. They want to promote long-term investment perspectives and sustainable value creation, making successful stewardship a reality. What do you mean by stewardship? What do you mean by stewardship? Have you heard of this term earlier? How can you build this kind of stewardship in an organization? In recent years, we have heard this term that has become part and parcel of the corporate world. The sense of stewardship, a careful and responsible management. Okay, this term's literal meaning is that a responsible, careful way of doing things. In an organization, in corporate world, this is expected from each and everyone. Making the management care for us, being kind. We are here in a money-making process. We are getting more profit, but how far we have a sense of ownership or belongingness, in which they have a control. But we have to take care of our employees. So it embodies the responsible planning and management of resources. That's what stewardship is all about. The concern of ICGN is that to create a successful stewardship in reality, to protect the minority shareholder rights, seeking transparency through robust reporting, auditing and metrics. So organizations, they take care in such a way. The global corporate governance works on that to assist countries in improving their standards of governance. So global organizations ensure all the countries are properly implementing the governance principles and practices, monitoring it, restructuring it, working on it. So the global organizations are strengthening the country's individual contribution towards corporate people, especially with the governance perspective. So how can you strengthen this? The spirit of enterprise, accountability, promoting fairness, transparency and responsibility. So here you have a convening value for the renowned players in the governance. So here you have a theme of partnership between the public and private sector, which consists of internationally recognized business leaders. They serve in an individual capacity. People from across different economies, developing, developed and transition economies will be there. So what is their role? To advise on the program, how to work, how to link to the private sectors, how to create the public-private partnership model, how to serve as champions, so that you can build a coalition for change. So these are all the global concerns in which we work. The objective is that to sensitize corporate leaders on the importance of good corporate governance, self-regulation based on social and environmental aspects as well. So we need to provide research training, capacity building, standard setting, monitoring, advocacy. These have to be ensured in the field of corporate governance. So to provide this assistance directly or indirectly, the activities have to be taken to seek for that. This is one such objective. Third is to develop strategies. You have to develop strategies that can enhance value for all the stakeholders and to ensure that long-term benefits to the shareholders as well as the society will be there in large. To institute recognitions for excellence. People who are doing good governance practices in the corporation, you should recognize them with awards. You have to develop a system. Already we have rating mechanisms, but again develop a system of corporate governance rating. So these are which the governance practices and principles are working on. Each and every organizations have different principles. Now I am going to discuss on the major principles given by Commonwealth Association of Corporate Governance. Their aim is to promote good governance standards, business practices throughout the Commonwealth in terms of financial development, teach and disseminate the standards. A significant contribution has to be given, whether it is private or public or family owned or state owned business enterprise. So what is the principle they have framed as an initiative towards strengthening corporate governance is that the first principle is exercise leadership, enterprise, integrity, so that you can achieve this continuing prosperity for the corporation. You can act in the best interest of the business enterprise so that you can have a very transparent, accountable and responsible culture. That is the first principle. Second principle is that to ensure a managed and effective process goal, you should have a mix of proficient directors, each of whom is able to add value and to bring in some independent judgment so that you can there is nothing to bear wrong. So judgments will be unbiased and you have a easy decision making process. So a mix of proficient directors are expected. Third principle, monitor and evaluate the implementation of strategies, policies, management, performances. You have to fix up criteria and plans. So you have to monitor and evaluate the things. Fourth one is determine the purpose, values, procedures and practices that will obviously create the reputation. The next principle is ensure that the corporation communicates with the shareholders and other stakeholders effectively. There should not be any communication gap between these people. Then next principle, identify the corporation's internal and external stakeholders and agree to the policy. Determine how the corporation should relate to them. Ninth principle, ensure that no one person or a block of persons has unfettered power, that is an appropriate balance of power and authority on the board is expected. Separate the role of chief executive officer and chairman. Have a balance between executive and non-executive directors. So these are all the principles framed by Commonwealth Association of Corporate Governance. Then next is reviewing mechanism. Review the process and procedure. Then only you can ensure the effectiveness of the internal system of control. The decision-making capability, the accuracy of reporting and the financial results at the high level at all times. Again, the next principle talks about appointing the CEOs in such a way that at least in the participating of the appointment of senior manager. Ensure the motivation and protection of intellectual capital intrinsic to the corporation. Give adequate training to their employees, management, and a succession plan for senior management. The next principle is ensure that all technology and systems used in corporation are adequate to properly run the business, and for that to a meaningful competitor will also remain. So you need to identify the key risk areas, KPIs, what you call KPIs, no? Key performance indicators of the business enterprise. So we have to ensure annually that the corporation is going with a good concern, with good effectiveness when you go for the next fiscal year. So these are the principles and different methods that have been prescribed by the global organization. So for a sustainable approach to corporate governance is the key in accomplishing the competitive advantage or for the long-term success for any company. It demands that the board of directors takes into account the economic, social and environmental expectations in an integrated way. This model requires a balance of interest. So for all of those who contribute in this current and future company success by means of sustainable value that satisfy both the shareholders as well as the stakeholders in the long term. So, to ensure the protection of stakeholders' rights, you need to embrace the best corporate governance practices across the globe. That is the global concern. An effective regulatory system along with the zeal on the part of the corporate world. So, what you can do, you can espouse the effective best governance practices and principles so that you can contribute substantially in the betterment of the stakeholders and the holistic development of the companies will be there. Okay, so in today's session, we have discussed about the global organization's perspective or their support in ensuring the effective, sustainable corporate governance practices across the globe. Thank you for attending today's session. We will meet you all in next session. Thank you.